Of all the creatures to ruin a hunting trip, it had to be a human. Gork, an 8-foot-tall predator with scales as dark and unyielding as obsidian and claws sharp enough to shred steel, crouched silently in the underbrush. His 4 eyes, each trained on a different angle, scanned the dense forest clearing ahead. A trio of fuzzy, wide-eyed Valry cubs huddled beneath the tangled roots of an ancient tree, their pale blue fur stark against the dark soil. Gork could already taste victory. Tonight he would feast. Just as he tensed to spring, a blur of movement crashed into the clearing. To Gork's astonishment, it was a human, unarmed and frantic. The man, clad in a tattered jacket and mud-caked boots, skidded to a halt between Gork and his prey, arms spread wide as if he were holding back a spaceship. "Run!" the human shouted over his shoulder at the bewildered cubs. The younglings remained frozen, their tiny bodies trembling with confusion and fear. With a low growl, Gork stepped into the moonlight, his claws glinting ominously. "You're not prey," he said in his guttural tongue. "You're an annoyance." The human didn't flinch. "Yeah, well, I've been called worse." "You're not touching them." Gork's lips curled into a snarl. Valry cubs were a delicacy across 5 star systems, their hides fetching exorbitant prices. He'd hunted dozens before and never had anyone interfered, especially not a scrawny human. Towering over the man, Gork growled, "You can't win. Step aside, human, or become my appetizer." "No," the human said firmly. His stance wasn't defiant. It was resolute. He picked up a broken branch from the ground, gripping it as if it were a legendary weapon. Gork laughed, a low, rumbling sound. "Brave, but foolish." With that, he lunged. The human sidestepped with surprising speed, jabbing the branch into Gork's side. It snapped against the predator's scales, but the man didn't stop. He hurled a rock at Gork's head, which harmlessly bounced off, yet caused the predator to pause. "Are you trying to annoy me to death?" Gork asked, amused. "Just buying time," the human replied, chest heaving. "Move it, little guys." Finally understanding, the cubs bolted, darting into the dense underbrush. Gork snarled and moved to give chase, but the human threw himself into the predator's path again, arms spread wide. "You'll have to go through me first." "Gladly," Gork growled, lunging with deadly intent. The human ducked under Gork's claws, ramming his shoulder into the predator's chest. Though it was like slamming into a wall, it knocked Gork off balance, just enough for the human to grab another branch. "Persistent," Gork said, irritation creeping into his tone. "But persistence won't save you." The human didn't reply. His ragged breaths and trembling legs betrayed his exhaustion, yet he gripped the branch tighter, refusing to back down. Gork lunged again, claws slashing. This time, he caught the human's arm, tearing through fabric and flesh. Blood seeped into the man's sleeve, but he didn't cry out. Instead, he swung the branch like a club, striking Gork's face. The predator roared in frustration rather than pain and reared back. Planting himself firmly, the human said, "Guess I'm not good at staying down." Gork paused, his 4 eyes narrowing. "Why risk your life for prey that isn't even your own species?" The human hesitated, then said, "Because someone has to." Before Gork could respond, a distant howl echoed through the forest, making the predator's spines bristle. "They'll be back soon," the human said, almost smug. "You might want to leave while you still can." Snarling, Gork backed away. "You've made an enemy today, human." "Get in line," the man muttered as Gork melted into the shadows. The human collapsed to his knees, clutching his bleeding arm. The forest fell silent again, save for the rustle of leaves and the faint drip of blood. Tearing a strip from his jacket, he wrapped the wound tightly, grimacing. Exhaustion weighed on him, but he allowed himself a small, tired smile. The cubs were safe, for now, but the distant howl wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. Adult Valry were coming. Staying put wasn't an option. Staggering to his feet, the man leaned against a tree, scanning the forest. A ridge loomed in the distance. Higher ground would provide a better view, and perhaps a way to ensure the cub's safety. The climb was brutal. Each step sent sharp jolts of pain through his injured arm, and his legs felt like lead. By the time he reached the top, he was drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. The forest stretched endlessly under the twin moon's pale glow. Amid the foliage, he spotted a trail of broken branches leading to a rocky outcrop. The cubs had headed that way. Before he could move, a low growl stopped him. A sleek predator with glowing yellow eyes and dark fur crouched at the ridge's edge. This scavenger wasn't as large as Gorik, but no less dangerous. Gripping a short branch, the man muttered, "You couldn't have waited until I was dead?" The creature pounced. Swinging with all his strength, the man struck its head. The blow sent the scavenger skidding but didn't kill it. As it recovered, the man lunged, driving the jagged branch into its side. With a final snarl, the beast collapsed. Hearing distant movement, the man dragged himself toward the outcrop. The cubs were huddled in a shallow cave, their wide eyes glinting with recognition. "Hey there," he said softly, crouching at the entrance. One cub crept closer, sniffing his injured arm. Despite the pain, he allowed the tiny creature to nuzzle him. Another howl pierced the air, closer this time. The man's stomach dropped. He couldn't stay here. They'd all be cornered. Gripping a sharp rock, he whispered to the cubs, "Stay put." Trembling, they pressed against the cave wall. Stepping outside, the man prepared for the inevitable. The first Valkyrie emerged, followed by two more. Their amber eyes glowed as they circled him, testing his defenses. When the lead predator lunged, the man drove the rock into its jaw. Blood sprayed as it howled in pain, retreating. The others paused, regrouping for a final strike. Before they could attack, a deep, resonant roar silenced the clearing. From the shadows emerged a massive Valkyrie, its silvery fur shimmering under the moonlight. The other predators lowered their heads and retreated. The silver Valkyrie stared at the man, its glowing eyes piercing. After an eternity, it turned toward the cave, as if acknowledging the cubs. Then, with a low rumble, it disappeared into the forest. Collapsing to his knees, the man sat in stunned silence. Finally, he returned to the cave. "It's all right," he whispered to the cubs. "They're gone. You're safe." One by one, they crept toward him, pressing against his legs. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself to relax. They had survived. Somewhere in the galaxy, stories would be told of the lone human who faced predators to protect lives that weren't his own. But to the cubs, he wasn't a legend. He was their guardian,